It's so good to be with you again. These Friday live streams are such a highlight of my month, and I am so excited to get to do this one on the Taurus new moon happening May 19th. Have it here in the chat here. May 19th, 2023 at 10:53 a.m. Central Time at 28 degrees of Taurus. So very, very late in Taurus. The moon will move on right away into Gemini, and the sun will be moving on into Gemini in just a couple days after this new moon. So I say all of that because this is the first lunation of the swapped cycle. Like it's reversed now, where we're going to have the Scorpio full moon lunar eclipse on May 5th, so earlier in Taurus season. And then we're going to end Taurus season with the new moon. And for the last, year, 2 years almost, we've been having the new moons first. So we would have like a new moon at the very beginning of Taurus, and then we would have all Taurus season to kind of water those seeds. Now we're in the opposite situation where our new moons are going to start happening at the very end of the season. So it's almost like a culmination of its own. Culminations are typically more associated with full moons, and new moons are so much more about the beginning of something, or like having a seed planted. But to have the sun do the new moon, the meet up with the moon, where they're at the same spot, the sun and the moon, they have a meeting once a month. It's called the new moon. And to do that at the very end of Taurus, so fascinating that we're starting this reversal with this Taurus new moon because of how jam freaking packed Taurus is right now. And I say right now because at the time of that new moon, I'm in a cycle where I am way ahead, right? Like I'm recording this on April 28th. So the Scorpio full moon hasn't even happened yet. We're like barely into Taurus season at all. So at some point I need to like skip a Friday or something, or like do a different topic to get a little bit closer back to the energy. But as I put in the chat here, I am a 0-degree Taurus rising and a first house Taurus Jupiter. And so I really am curious, like, what are your Taurus placements? What are your favorite keywords for Taurus? I would love to hear that in the chat, and then I can respond to it a little bit later towards the end. First, I'm going to start off by telling you mine, because Taurus is one of my favorite signs, and I have to show it even an extra ounce of love because it was my least favorite sign when I very first found astrology. I was like, how freaking boring can one sign be? This is so stupid. And so I had so much like disdain and impatience for Taurus. It was too simple. I needed something more complex. And over these last almost 3 years since I first discovered astrology, I was shown my natal chart by a life coach that I hired, not knowing that she used natal charts. And then she's like, hey, look at this. And that was August of 2020, my introduction to astrology. And in these almost 3 years, Taurus has become, it's my home, and it's my absolute favorite sign to get to spend time in. It's the one I reach for the most often. And I think for me, especially, that's true because of my rising sign. Like I've heard in the astrology culture, and this just kind of clicked and kind of set off on an experiment of like, yeah, what if I did that? But I've heard a lot, like, we live like our rising sign, or like whatever's kind of going on in your first house. Like that's kind of, I am this. And the more you can line up with that first house energy, that, rising sign, whatever it's pointing at, that the more you're kind of in harmony, and that you're lined up on your path to where the entire chart, everything that's going on in the chart, can be manifested kind of in the smoothest way when we walk like our rising sign, when we lean into that. So for me, I've been leaning into Taurus, stupid Taurus. 3 years ago, that's how I felt about it. I'm like, how boring. I don't want to be a Taurus rising, especially where I was like a 0-degree Taurus rising. I'm like, I'm sure it's Aries. I'm sure it's supposed to be something more exciting than stupid old Taurus. And so I have to just like really Like, god damn. Like, at this point, simplicity is like the most beautiful thing in the world to me. I absolutely love it. And that's one of the pieces of Taurus is simplicity. It's like that's the easiest way to disconnect from Taurus is when you start adding facets and sides and but what if this and other considerations like that's like so opposite of what Taurus is. It's being. It's our breath that we don't even have to think about. It just, our lungs, they naturally seek oxygen. And after they turn that oxygen into carbon dioxide, they naturally exhale that from our body. Like our beingness is the beingness of our planet is. It's rotating on its axis. Our hearts are pounding right here, right now. And like these are the criteria for all is well. I heard something else really cool lately that was like, our nervous systems can put us into fight or flight when we get triggered, when we have a current right now experience that reminds us of something that we went through in the past and we get scared, we get triggered into fear that it's going to be like it was that time. And so our nervous system just explodes with adrenaline and all kinds of helpful, that's the key word, helpful agents to help us defend our being. Like Taurus is so simple. What she said there is like, so we can go so easily into fight or flight and recognizing that you're there and then ask yourself, is there blood or is there fire? And if there's not blood or fire, you're probably just fine. Like well-being is dominant. It's everything is fine. Byron Katie says, other than what you're thinking and believing, all is well. And this is Taurus, this place of knowing that all is well. You're right. That's simple. That's really simple. Like there's nothing to earn. You don't have to earn your well-being. There's nothing to possess. I mean, that's kind of the shadow side of material or shadow side of Taurus is more like a materialism or like hoarding possessions, hoarding wealth, those kinds of things. And that even is like a misunderstanding of where well-being is coming from. And I get it. Like I get why it looks like money equals well-being, but especially for those that have, danced with money, they know that that's not true. Money is a headache. Having money is complicated. Having inner peace is actually very simple. And letting yourself relax into inner peace is something that money cannot buy. No amount of money in the bank account will cause you to feel secure. If anything, the more money you have in the bank account, the more afraid you are of losing it. So, yeah, it's like, what is true security? And in my opinion, and this is for everybody in their own beautiful Taurus stubbornness to figure out for themselves, but in my opinion, true security is being able to find peace within yourself. Because at that point, if you're capable of coming into a place of still inner peace, of knowing that all is well, then it no longer matters what anybody else around you is doing or not doing or the choices that they're making. Like if you know your own well-being, there's nothing left to worry about for yourself or anybody else. And that is, again, going back to simplicity, like all is well. Well-being is dominant. This is the heartbeat of Taurus, the breath in and out, and how natural that process is for us to live inside our well-being. That like even when we are lost in our fantasy of our thoughts and our what we're thinking and believing, which is like, everybody every day. So we're all in this together. Even when that's the case, our Taurus well-being is still taking care of us. Our lungs are still inflating and deflating. Our intestines are still chomping away at whatever we put in there. Like our brain is beating our hearts right now. That's going on. Like, I had a moment recently where this actually goes back a little bit to Aries energy. It was very near the Aries solar eclipse new moon that happened at the end of Aries. And there's I can't ever remember who all the other artists are on it with him, but I know Ram Dass is one of them. It's called Sit Around the Fire. Yeah, Sit Around the Fire by John Hopkins, Ram Dass, and East Forest. And I highly, highly, highly recommend that song. It's kind of a like guided meditation kind of a song. And I just like listen to it on repeat. I recommend it to everyone. It very much like hooks you up with like the inner spark that is your life force. And the realization that came to me was around basically answering the question, why do manifestations often feel hollow? Like, why do physical manifestations, like, you know, you get the thing that you wanted with every fiber of your being, like it burned like this passion inside of you, like you had to do this, you had to build it, you had to do it, you had to go there, you had to, and then you do it, and it's like, I mean, yeah, this is cool and this is a thing, but like, it felt so much more alive like when it was inside of me than it does like when I'm actually inside the experience of it. And what the realization was, I channeled this through my spiritual support team. The reason for that is because it will, no matter what you manifest in this physical world, it could be winning the lottery, it could be your physical soulmate, just like the epitome of beauty, and it's all staring at you thinking you're the sexiest thing it's ever. You can manifest whatever you want in the physical, and it will never compare to the abundance and the wealth and the satisfaction we've felt in being born, in manifesting our soul's intent. God, that fucking into a physical vehicle that can go off terrain, that can be on planet, that can bump and like ride the wave and like do all the things. And like our soul rejoiced at the manifestation of our body in such a way that no physical manifestation will ever live up to that. Our physical body is the pile of wealth that we all came here for. It's just like, and you have it. You have it right now. You already have it right now. We already have the most abundant thing that we will ever manifest in this life. We've had it all along. It's our physical vehicle. It makes everything possible. And like this level of simplicity, this level of like kind of, you know, moving between the shadow of Taurus being kind of attachment to the material world and the highest frequency of Taurus being inner peace. It's like total detachment from the physical world is how you achieve inner peace. You realize that nobody else has to be peaceful for me to be peaceful. And if there's no blood and there's no fire, other than what I'm thinking and believing right now, I'm okay. And to feel that viscerally in our body is I believe, the highest degree of what abundance truly is. And I've also been having a lot of reflections lately with my spiritual support team that are around the new currency. This is like something much bigger that's coming onto the planet right now and has been for a long time. I mean, I would say like decades at least, if not like hundreds of years, or maybe for all time we've been heading right here. But like there's a new currency coming onto the planet and it's non-physical. It does not have physical form. Like the true, and it's the true currency is like what it's coming to me as, and it's inner peace. It's the ability to not be a yo-yo tied to physical circumstance. And here, this is awesome because I haven't even thought about this book for a long time, but like I'm going to recommend a book called let's see, Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. And Viktor Frankl, I don't believe he's still alive, but I don't know that for sure. But like he was in World War II, he was in several different concentration camps all the way through the end of the war. And he was a doctor before he was put into the concentration camps. And like his whole family was killed in there. And he was a doctor, so he helped people in the concentration camps as best as he could. He eventually like kind of worked his way up and was kind of friends with, some officers or whatever. So it wasn't quite as bad for him, but still like, you're in a concentration camp, you're a slave. And then towards the end, before the war was over, he had a chance to escape and he didn't take it. He stayed with his patients. He stayed with the people that he was helping. He had like found meaning in what he was doing and he was peaceful there. He was peaceful in the purpose of who he was in that moment of like, he was able to help and these people needed help and that's all we're doing anyway. And I don't care if I'm in this camp or out of the camp, it doesn't matter. I'm helping these people. That's my meaning. And so that book is such a gift that, hopefully 99.9% of the people on this planet never have to understand what it's like. I wouldn't wish it on anybody to have every ounce of your physical freedom and autonomy, and they take your clothes and they take your home and they take your possessions and they take your everything. Everything physical is taken. And then what are you left with? And there's your true currency, because the real currency, the real value is nothing you could ever lose. That's where, again, I go back to Sit Around the Fire by Ram Dass and all them. Like, who you really are, it has nothing to do with what's manifesting around you in the physical, except for when you believe that that's an extension of you. And so all of this, like there's several transits. Like I said, there's a lot going on in Taurus, starting with the lunar nodes. Holy moly. And before I continue with the transits, if you like this, can you give it a thumbs up? Awesome. Thank you. So the Taurus transits, like I said, like it's like jam-packed at the time of this new moon on May 19th. And the lunar nodes have been in Taurus and Scorpio, the North Node going through Taurus since January of 2022. They entered at 29 degrees Taurus, 29 degrees Scorpio, and have been moving across Taurus for the last like 16 months now. And they move on into the next signs in July, this summer, here in a couple months. And so that is one where the Scorpio South Node has been helping us to release attachments to old ways of sourcing our power. That's a mouthful. We're releasing our attachments. We're letting go. This doesn't serve me anymore. And as much as I would love to fix it and be able to carry it still, I don't think it's best if I just let it go. So we're releasing our attachments to the old ways of sourcing our power. So the old ways are typically what we were taught, like what we had modeled for us when we grew up and possibly in past lives, if you go there. Those patterns of sourcing power have been building for a really long time. And so letting go of them and crafting new ones and all of that, it's been a deep excavation since January of 2022 of all of these roots of how our power dynamics work within ourselves and with other people. And that whole time, the Taurus North Node on that end of things has been pulling us like a magnet into the center of ourselves, into the inhale and the exhale and the simplicity of the well-being that is natural for us. It's urging us to, the Scorpio way is much more fighting it out and merging with another and consensus with another, agreement and harmony with another, merging with another person to get what you want. And on the Taurus end, you already have it all. That's a quote from Sit Around the Fire. You couldn't possibly be greedy because you already have it all. That's what he says in there. I love it so much. So that Taurus North Node has really been drawing us in to our inner well-being. And I think it's fascinating. Again, this is why it's so interesting that this is the first, we're flipping the lunar cycle so that we have the full moon first and then the new moon. And at the time of the new moon, just before that, 3 days to be exact, before the new moon, May 16th, 2023, we have Jupiter entering Taurus. May 16th, 2023. Jupiter covers about a sign a year, so it takes 12 years to get all the way around, meaning it hasn't been in Taurus for about 12 years now. And those are 12-year cycles that begin typically, like there's a couple different ways to think about it. Like for mass consciousness, a Jupiter through Aries is kind of the beginning of a new Jupiter cycle, a new 12-year cycle. But really for each of us individually, we're also going through our own Jupiter cycle that begins with our Jupiter return. So like for me specifically, my Jupiter's in Taurus. So, later, more in like 2024, I'll have my Jupiter return, and that'll be the beginning of my personal 12-year Jupiter cycle. But we all kind of started one like in December of 2022 when Jupiter made its pass through Aries very, very quickly. It freaking ran through Aries. And that has been like, do all the things, like all the opportunities, all the exciting things. And it was moving so freaking fast. And then Jupiter hits Taurus, and it's going to go into Taurus. It's going to do a retrograde back into Taurus, and then it's going to keep covering Taurus, and it's going to be in Taurus solid for a year. And that's where like all of this expansion that Jupiter promises and all the excitement that Aries brought with it, it's like, yes, all the opportunities, and that is exciting, but Taurus knows that there's only right here, right now, and there's only a limited time and space and resources for taking opportunities. So let me make sure that I'm going to work on the best one. Let me make sure that I'm going to prioritize which of these is the most valuable, and I'm going to start there. So there's like a pragmatism, like a realistic evaluation process and a resting that says you don't have to do it all, right? Like you only have to do what you want. You only have to do what you personally feel you need to do. And so get really clear and get really certain about what's valuable for you, what's worthwhile for you. So Jupiter, May 2023 to May of 2024, it moves in, it's like sitting at 0 degrees during this new moon. So like just in time for the new moon, freaking wild. And we also have, this is another one that we have Mercury retrograde, which isn't so much, I don't think, let me double check actually. Yeah, so it's come out of its retrograde and moved forward a few degrees at the time of the new moon. Actually, that was a few days. It's come out of its retrograde at the time of the new moon. I can't think of it. Hang on, let me fix it. Here we go. That's another Taurus thing. They really like to be certain. It has come out of its retrograde. Okay, now we're certain, and we know that Mercury retrograde is over by the time we get to this new moon, but it's also happening in Taurus. So like Mercury went all the way up to almost Uranus, almost a conjunction with Uranus, and then it turned back around and went back to almost a conjunction with the North Node. And then it's going to station direct again just before this new moon in Taurus. So there's so much happening like in the first decan of Taurus, like the first 10 degrees. There's Jupiter sitting at 0. There's the North Node that's at like 2 or 3 degrees. And then there's Mercury that's at like 5 or 6 degrees. And so all of that, plus you have Uranus in the mix that's like in the middle of Taurus. And then you have the moon and the sun at 28 degrees of Taurus. So you have Taurus just like freaking lit the hell up. And this feels to me, like I said, new moons are beginnings, but this one feels like a culmination of a lot of things that have to do with every ounce of the beautiful work you've been doing over these last 16 months with the North Node moving through Taurus. This is like what did you get from that? Like, what was the value that you were able to harvest during this transit as far as like knowing your worth in a more solid way, knowing your inner peace more personally? What new strength, because that's what it gives you, what new strength do you have access to? What new roots into your own solid ground do you have? Like, I'm picturing this, like this tree that over the last, 15, 16 months with the North Node going through Taurus, this tree has gone from like a flapping in the wind kind of palm tree thing to like an oak tree that has just like no give in it whatsoever. And, that in and of itself, like not being flexible and being rigid is again one of the shadows of Taurus. But with the North Node going through Taurus, that's what we're leaning into, is being more rigid, being more sure-footed inside of our vessel, being more rooted during the storm of like, let whoever's emotional storm happen around you as much as it has to, and the tree just kind of like waits it out.